This is City Paper Live, Pittsburgh City Paper's weekly talk show, where we bring you behind-the-scenes stories from our weekly and online coverage, featuring City Paper writers, friends, and guests. Welcome to the show.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Dito. I'm a senior writer here at Pittsburgh City Paper. We're filling in for Lynn, Cullen today. I'm going to be talking about our election guide that just dropped, and election next week, November 5th. And Hannah, our another writer here, is we're gonna talk about the election. She's gonna ask me some questions and stuff. You excited?
Very excited. But yeah, this election is it's kind of spicy for a local election, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for races that most people don't even know exist. I think most people don't even understand that what district attorneys are or anything like that. So for those kind of races that are very low on people's radar, it's been super exciting if you're a nerd and a political junkie like City Paper staff.
People don't know, what is a district attorney?
Yes. Well, I guess actually let's just start with what our election, what big elections we have this year. It's the 2019 general election, municipal elections mostly. There's also some statewide judges that are picked at some of the lower level of our state courts. We don't really talk about those that much in here. They're kind of boring, honestly. They kind of like to get into. They are important, so I suggest you go to some other websites to learn about them, or follow the mailers or whatever gets sent to you. But we're going to focus on Allegheny County elections. So we have we feature two big countywide elections in here: the Allegheny County District Attorney and Allegheny County Executive. Allegheny County Executive is kind of like the mayor of Allegheny County. That race is between the incumbent Rich Fitzgerald and the Republican Matt Drodds, and that race has been pretty quiet, and it's been predicted that Fitzgerald is going to win easily. He's an incumbent, he's popular, he's got a ton of money. But the other race, District Attorney, is between the incumbent Stephen Zappala and independent Lisa Middleman. And a District Attorney, as I'll try to explain, is basically in charge of all of the county's prosecution, all of the criminal justice focused issues of the county. I believe I actually have an explainer in here. The district attorney kind of decides how people will be prosecuted in the county. If you are charged of a crime, the district attorney is going to decide how to prosecute you, basically. District attorneys have incredible discretion. They are incredibly powerful, honestly, and it's why this race, I think, has garnered so much attention and so much money and a lot of things. So it's a big deal.
Could you explain a little how Zappala got to be such a contentious candidate?
Yeah. So Stephen Zappala has been the district attorney in Allegheny County for more than 20 years. He was first appointed, I believe, in some kind of changing of the guard situation that happened a long time ago. He did win his first election, but he hasn't really had a contentious election since then. And there's been a lot of high-profile cases over the years, especially ones that have involved, I guess, black people, and shootings involved, either police-involved shootings or criminal cases that have involved high profile, including Antoine Rose, obviously. I never remember the other ones. Darius Miles, I believe, was a really big case. There was the case over in the north side just this year with the gas station. Yep, employees. There was another case that, there have been a lot of stories that have been criminal justice stories that have dropped this year that have been big. 4 teenagers were held in Allegheny County Jail for 15 months, innocent teenagers that had alibis. Minors, yes, that were basically put into the system. One of the reasons that they were blamed that they were put into the jail unjustly was their alibis were never heard. They were put into this system that Zappala prosecuted through, the grand jury indictment system. It just means that the case goes a lot faster. than maybe it should have. So and I guess all those things combined, there's been this kind of growing tide that some Allegheny County voters want a big change in their district attorney, and I think especially among the black community, he's not popular.
And I feel like it's also, I remember like during the Antoine Rose protest, one of the things was people were kind of upset that there's just been the same DA for so long, that's not a position that someone should hold for 20 years.
Yeah, I think especially when there's some contentious things happening, especially when there's big issues like the Antoine Rose case. I know a lot of the activists were upset that they didn't think that the method in which Zappala prosecuted the former East Pittsburgh police officer was correct, and again, he was acquitted. The officer's acquitted of all charges. So yes, there's definitely a groundswell, and this race is a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, people. Please.
So where did Lisa Middleman come from? I feel like she sort of was a late entry to the race.
She was, well, because Zappala was challenged in the primary by Teron Jenkins, who was a public defender and a criminal defender, and he had a pretty lackluster campaign. If I'm just going to throw my opinion out there, he also got hit really hard because he had shared his views on gay marriage and just trans people and just generally his anti-LGBTQ views. He later apologized for those, and later he said he talked to advocates and said he kind of not necessarily had a personal change of heart, but that he is thinking differently about how he once thought about that. But in a Democratic primary, you're talking about just the most liberal voters, and they were thrown off by that, and that kind of really killed any momentum his campaign would have had. And even so, he still won 40% of the vote, which a lot of people thought was overachieving. And so I think that's why Middleman came in, who is an independent. She's also a public defender, also a criminal defender, and is running on kind of a similar, what's the word? Similar, platform as Jenkins, a criminal justice reform thing. I mean, our jails overcrowded.
Mm-hmm.
There's been huge discrepancies among how black people are charged in the county versus how white people are charged, and basically wanting to up in that system, and that's kind of where it's been at.
But even though she's independent, I think it is clear she's the more progressive candidate.
She's definitely a progressive-minded independent. She was a registered Democrat for a long time, and then to run against Zappala, she couldn't run as a Democrat because the had already happened. So she switched her, affiliation in time to file as an independent, and she's garnered a ton of support from progressive groups. Matched Zappala's fundraising, $200,000, more than $200,000. That's about what Zappala got, and that's about what she got. A little bit less for Middleman, but marginally. And
we should also say, I don't think we mentioned yet that Zappala is also the Republican nominee.
Yeah, and actually, let's show our cover here. We got Zappala on the cover, and he is the twins from The Shining, because he is cross-filed, so he is the Democrat nominee and the Republican nominee, and I think this year is a really unique year in that a cross-filed large candidate like Zappala has a legitimate contender in Middleman. So you don't have to straight party ticket this year.
Yes.
You can really think about who you want to support, and it's not just this race. There's city council races that have legitimate independents running, and go in there and pick each candidate, because
I feel like that is part of the larger issue of the two-party system, where it's Bernie Sanders had to run as a Democrat because not enough people would vote for an independent, even if it aligned with their views.
Especially in Pennsylvania, because you can still you can just hit the straight party button, and that might be changing soon. We'll see. There's a election reform bill in the House that has support, but as of this election, as of right now, there's still a lot of straight party voters. In 2016, in Allegheny County, 40-some% of of all the ballots cast were straight party ticket. That is a lot.
For both Democrat and Republican.
Yes, for both Democrat and Republican. So just going in there and just hitting the one button. There are arguments that it's better for efficiency. You can just go in there and do your thing and then leave, because a lot of people might just be clicking each one, anyway. But this year, I think I would suggest, and I think the paper suggests, to pick up our guide and think about who you're going to support.
Beware the dangers of straight party voting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so yeah, that's the DA's race. If you want to learn more about it, go ahead and pick up our guide. There's definitely, Zapala's definitely has been running to the right of Middleman, I think intentionally.
Oh, do you want to mention what his son has done recently?
Oh yeah. We just dropped a story on our website last night about Steven Zapala's son, Steve Zapala. They have the same name pretty much. He's also his campaign manager, and he was seen. I saw him actually at the Trump rally and speech just last week, and it's so interesting because there's already been this kind of groundswell within the county Democratic committee. There are a lot of members don't want to support Zapala. They don't think he aligns with their Democratic liberal views, and they want to support Middleman. Mm-hmm. And party bylaws say you can't do that because he's already won the Democratic nomination, and so there's this tension and turmoil within the party that basically says, we're Democrats, we want to support the independent Middleman because we believe that she is more what we should have as our DA. And this all comes at the same time when the Democratic Party in the county is saying, no, you have to support this Democrat, and then if you don't, then this could break up our whole system, and you could have Democrats for Trump in Allegheny County because we're not following these bylaws. And the irony is that then Steven Zapala's campaign manager went to a Trump rally. Steven Zapala is a Democrat, and he has been his entire career. And so it's just this, it's so beautiful. It's just like a beautiful irony of like this whole election that it's run by, his son, and he's been hobnobbing with Republicans. Like, his girlfriend is a Republican, and that's fine, obviously. Who cares who his girlfriend is? But I'm just saying that the optics of it are really interesting in this election, because he's up for election now. If his campaign manager was doing this in 2 years or something like that, whatever, who cares, right? But the optics of it are just unreal.
And when like you say that the people were told, Democrat politicians were told they could not vote for leader middle, like, is there a consequence to that, or is it just sort of like
so obviously you can vote for whoever you want, but if you're in the Democratic committee, that means you're either appointed or elected member of the party that tries to get Democrats elected in Allegheny County. So you're part of this party structure. You're a member of the party, and so as a member of the party, you have rules applied to you. So if you're a member of the Moon Township Democratic Committee, right? Mm-hmm. Your goal is to help get Democrats elected in Moon and Allegheny County at large, basically. And so that's why there are rules that whoever wins the Democratic nomination, like Steve Zapala, you support that person. As you obviously don't want to support the other party, the Republican, mm-hmm. right? Or even an independent challenger, because you're the Democratic Party. And so I think that does make sense. But in this specific situation, in the way that Democrats in the party believe that Middleman would actually more represent their values, I think that makes sense, especially because Zapala, one, met with young Republicans as his first campaign event back in August, which also City Paper also covered. And he's running to the right of Middleman. He's talking about security. He's talking about school safety, all these things. Like, I mean, the very stark difference to the Middleman campaign, which is talking about criminal justice reforms that would honestly be more lenient, so that we don't have as many people in jail, so that low-level drug crimes aren't prosecuted as hard, so that low-level crimes are not leading to people who are in jail because they disproportionately hurt poor people, studies have shown. And so this is the contrast that we have. And if I was a Democratic official or member, I would also be like, I kind of want Middleman to win. So I kind of want to tell my other people out there to vote for Middleman. I see where they're coming from, but they also can't because of the rules of the party. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so this is the most contentious election this year, probably. What are some other ones that might be interesting?
Yeah. So I actually think the other probably most interesting races are the county council seats. There are a few county council races we highlighted too that are pretty contentious. And right now, county council is basically the body that controls our county laws. They'll submit a county law. They'll have it go through a vetting process. They'll take it to a vote, and then the county executive, Rich Fitzgerald, will decide whether or not to sign or veto it, just in the same way that the presidency works, but it's just for the county, just for county laws, countywide laws. And so the like two ones we highlighted were suburban districts, District 2, which is like North Hills and Swickley, and then District 5, which is South Hills, Mount Lebanon, Upper St. Clair, Bethel Park, and one other one, Bridgeville.
Could you maybe explain for me and also other people who don't know the difference between Allegheny County Council and Pittsburgh City Council?
So yes, so Pittsburgh City Council is just the laws that inside the city boundaries of Pittsburgh. The city boundaries of Pittsburgh are big, but they're not the entire county. About 300,000 residents live in Pittsburgh, but about 1.2 million live in Allegheny County. So there's way more people that live outside the county. That doesn't mean that everything Allegheny County does will affect your own municipality. So if you live in Swickley, say, Swickley also has its own local government that will govern local laws. Basically, that's usually like their local streets, their local police department, stuff like that. But the county also has authority over county-wide laws, whether that's that have to do with our air pollution. They govern our county health, basically. They have to do with county-owned roads, which are our bridge, some of our bridges, like the triplet bridges downtown, and also things that deal with LGBTQ social issues, things that deal with the jail. The jail is governed by county council, and so that's basically the importance of it. There, right now, county council is majority Democratic body. It's I believe 11-6. I think Democrats to Republicans, but even with that balance, there's still a lot of moderate Democrats on the body, and so there have been some contentious issues that have come up this year. It's a great election year, guys. That have come up this year. There's two big bills in county council that have either been proposed and failed, or have been proposed and have yet to come up for like a vote that these races are going to affect. One is a conversion therapy ban. Practice. I think I actually wrote down a definition here. If I want to read it, might be easier. So conversion therapy is, here we go. Where is it? It's a controversial practice of using psychological intervention to get LGBT youth to change their sexual orientation. It's basically sending kids to a therapist or some camp. Sending LGBTQ kids to a therapy or camp where a therapist, an authority figure, will basically try to tell them that they're not LGBTQ,
or tell them to change,
and tell them and try to get them to change. The studies have shown that it's
very bad.
It's very bad. It's psychologically damaging to the children. It can lead to suicide, among other terrible things. I think most of our listeners and people who read the city paper understand that we are advocates for the LGBTQ, and this is a bad thing. The city of Pittsburgh has already banned this practice. Allegheny County has been proposing a ban, and it hasn't gone through yet. Basically, it's been proposed. One bill has been proposed. Democrats proposed it. The Republicans have also proposed a bill that's a conversion therapy ban bill, but it's much less strict, I guess. They basically say that it's okay as long as the child can give consent, which how can a minor give consent? And again, it's there are studies that show that it is psychologically damaging no matter what. And so basically, these two races, these Allegheny County district race, District 2 is between Christine Allen, who is a Swickley Borough councilor right now, she's a Democrat, and the incumbent Cindy Kirk from Wexford is the Republican, and they have diverging views on the conversion therapy ban. Actually, Christine Allen is is a lesbian, and Allen is in favor of a strict conversion therapy ban, and
You mean Kirk? Kirk is in favor of a ban. Oh.
no, Allen
Okay,
is in favor
I
of a
see.
strict ban. Kirk is in favor, or actually hasn't come out on any side of it, but is skeptical of a strict ban. So if that's a big issue for you, if you're a voter in Allegheny County and you live in the North Hills or Swickley, and you care about what the county is going to do in terms of a conversion therapy ban, it's a contentious election, and it would probably sway the decision. It would make the decision easier if you support Allen. That would make the decision easier to pass a strict ban. If you support Kirk, then that could potentially be easier for them to pass a weaker ban or not do a ban at all. So yeah, I think it's
And if
it's really
Allen
interesting.
won, she would be the first LGBTQ member.
I believe so.
In the county council,
yes,
right?
I
Or
believe so.
openly.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to track county council because it's been a pretty uncovered body for its existence. But I've talked to some people, and it's kind of widely agreed upon that Allen would be the first LGBTQ openly person on county council. I believe there's only one other regional politician who is openly LGBTQ. There might be others, but Bruce Krause, the city councilor for the South Side and the president of Pittsburgh City Council.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a really big deal. There's also the same dynamic plays out in the South Hills between the Democrat Thomas Matthew Durr and the Republican Sue Means, who's the incumbent. They both have diverging views on this. So if you support the Democrat, that would mean a stricter conversion therapy ban. If you support the Republican, that would mean a weaker ban or supporting that. There's also another big county council thing is a police accountability bill that was brought up and failed recently, which is the creation of a Citizens Police Review Board, which would mean that there would be a board of appointed citizens and police officers and other people that would decide how to investigate any police misconduct that had taken place. And this was pushed after the Antoine Rose killing, and that bill failed. And one of the reasons it failed is that the moderate Democrats joined the Republicans in opposing that bill, and so it didn't get enough votes. But if you had these two Democrats who support the police accountability bill, then that would flip it, and then that would probably mean that you would get that police accountability bill. That's rare in in elections, in local elections, that you do this and ipso facto you would get this other thing. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah. So I think the two county council races are really interesting. So if you're a listener from the suburbs in the South Hills or the North Hills, check it out for sure.
And there are two bills or referendums on the ballot.
Yeah.
Marcy's Law and then the Parks.
Yes, Parks referendum.
Tax one.
Yeah.
Could you, let's start with Marcy's Law.
Yeah, Marcy.
I still feel I don't understand it, even though you wrote a very long article and I read it, because it's purposely vague.
Yes. Marcy's Law is a statewide referendum that everybody is going to be voting on in Pennsylvania. It is a so-called victims' right referendum. It's a constitutional amendment. It's already passed the legislature 2 times. And now it's up to the voters. That's how you have to change the Constitution in Pennsylvania. It has to go through the legislature twice, and then you have to, and then the voters have to decide. I'm still kind of confused by it, honestly. It would change the. It would, I guess man, I'm doing a bad job, but. It would.
How did it talk about the origin? How it got here? Because it's not like a Pennsylvania bread.
No, it's
bread
not.
thing.
But I do want to explain exactly what it is, and it's really hard to do it. What the amendment would propose is basically notifying victims and victims' families more so of an accused criminal or of a criminal's basically like whereabouts or bail hearings or anything along that matter. But it also has some language that could infringe on the rights of the accused. So that's where it's like kind of mixed up. But it's basically, the whole sell of it is the victims aren't informed enough about how their accused person is being handled in the legal system. You want to inform them more so that they know how to react to it. And so the origin of this amendment is not a Pennsylvania grassroots effort at all. It comes from one guy in California named Henry Nicholas. He's a billionaire. He was a .com billionaire who started this software company called Broadcom. His sister was murdered in 1983. Her name was Marcy. She was murdered in 1983 in California from her ex-boyfriend. After the ex-boyfriend was accused of that murder, he made bail and basically still lived in the same town in Southern California that they lived in. And so the family, including Henry and his mother, would see this accused person out, and they said it was traumatizing. And I think that's understandably, it is traumatizing. But it's not like anything in that story was unusual to our justice system. That's how our justice system works. If you make bail, you are allowed out. OJ made bail and was allowed out.
Guilty till proven innocent.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, innocent till proven guilty.
Yes. And so that happens a lot. And so it is unfortunate that they lived in the same town, and it was traumatizing having to see him at the grocery store and other times. But what Henry Nicholas said was really traumatizing is that they didn't know that he made bail, basically. They weren't aware that he made bail, and so they just saw him out at the grocery store, and they're like, what is he doing out? We didn't know he made bail. And so that's why they've been pushing that constitutional amendment. They started in California. That passed in 2008 in California. In the interim, obviously, that was a long time after she was murdered. In the interim, the Nicholas family was involved in a lot of tough on crime bills that passed in California, including the infamous three strikes law, which has basically been totally undone in California at this point. And
it passed in other states, right?
And then,
I think
yes,
in North Dakota.
Yes, and then after 2008, Henry Nicholas, again a billionaire, started funding all these efforts to get it passed, to try to get it passed in all 50 states, and then eventually the federal government. And he's been successful in North Dakota, Nevada, in I think Florida, I believe North Carolina. I think a dozen states so far. And they're trying to do it here in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania effort is 100% funded by Nicholas. There's no grassroots efforts of people in Pennsylvania that have been like, we need this law. There are victim advocates in Pennsylvania that have joined the Marcy's Law cause and believe that we need it and have advocated for it. There are Marcy's Law workers who are being paid by Nicholas to advocate for this law.
It's easy to make it sound good, right? You're like,
it's
giving rights to victims.
It's
but
probably going to pass, honestly, because there's been so many TV ads, there's been so many mailers that most people are going to see this and they'll be like, oh, victim needs rights. They need rights. Of course they need rights. But it's way more complicated than that.
The ACLU even has said.
The ACLU, the League of Women Voters, a lot of newspaper editorials have said no. I believe the Post-Gazette has said no. Washington Observer in Washington County has said vote no on this. It's very vague. It's redundant. We already have a Pennsylvania crime victims statute that offers pretty much every one of these suggestions in Marcy's Law. One of the things that has been I guess nerve-wracking for not only the ACLU but other people is the victims. It says the referendum says that victims can deny discovery requests from the accused. It's really confusing though, because apparently discovery requests are usually are usually through the prosecutors, which is the state in this instance. But the ACLU has said that this bill would give the state too much power over the accused.
I think the fear is that it's a change to the Constitution, and
Yes.
it's a lot easier to vote that in than to get it out once it's in
Super
the
hard to
Constitution.
undone.
So
North
once
Dakota-
it's in there, they can sort of interpret the vagueness to
Yes.
No end.
Yes, and North Dakota legislators who passed the constitutional amendment recently did a study on the effects of it, and they said it hasn't done much, if anything, for victims, and there are some small consequences for the accused that have come out of this from this study. And a North Dakota legislator that I quote in my story had said that this is something that's really hard to undo because the constitutional amendment is incredibly hard to undo, and so it's a doozy. But again, it's probably going to pass because a lot of politicians support it. But if you're a politician, how can you not support it? Because then your opponents can go, you don't support victims,
Right?
And so
Which
it's
is
all
like
rhetoric.
Criminal justice system does not support victims ever. So
Yeah.
I don't think it'll start with this law.
Yes, and so yes, that's one of the constitutional. That's one of the referendums on the ballot this year. The other one is the City of Parks referendum, which we also cover in the election guide. It proposes a half property tax millage rate on city property owners.
What do you mean when you say $500,000?
So,
that sounds like $500,000, but
yes,
I don't think it is.
I know, and we try to explain that in there. It is not $1 million. You don't have to pay $500,000. A mill is a measurement of your property taxes, basically. And so I think the city of Pittsburgh is like 8 point something mills that are levied on property owners. A mill is $1. You have to pay $1 for every $1,000 in assessed value of your home. So if you go to the county website, you can see how much your home or property has been assessed, and from that, then you have to pay. With this tax increase, if you support it and it passes, you would have to pay $1 for every $2,000 of your assessed value. So if your home costs $100,000, is assessed at $100,000, then you would pay $50 extra a year to basically what would go into a parks fund that would help maintenance, rehabilitation, capital projects, programming for city parks. And the City Parks Conservancy, which is this nonprofit entity, public-private partnership that works on the parks, which has been fundraising private money for a long time to help the parks, is trying to basically support this bill that would bring in some public money directly into their efforts to rehabilitate the parks. They say that we have a $400 million backlog on the parks. We haven't seen a lot of investment in the parks for the last several decades. And this is not just the big parks. It's not just Shenley Parks, not just Riverview Parks, not just what's another one?
Highland.
Huh?
Highland.
No. Yes, Highland. Thank you. Highland, Frick Park. Yeah, those are the 4 big ones. It's not just those big ones. It's every little park. It's Friendship Parklet, where Hannah and I live, and
we live inside the
yeah,
park.
That's it. We're just we're park people. No, but it's every little park in the city. I believe there's hundreds of them, and that's what it's proposed. And yeah.
It sounds like pretty positive. $50 is not that much, but it's pretty. A lot of people oppose this. Can you explain? Why?
I think the opposition comes from one. There's always going to be anti-tax opposition. Everywhere, always. It's American. It's American value to be anti-tax, much to my chagrin. But so there's always going to be opposition from there. But some of the other opposition is that we don't think there's some people who don't think we need this tax because we have a surplus in our city budget right now. The city controller, Michael Lamb, is opposed to this, and he says, well, we have this surplus. We've gotten out of financial distress. We are starting to raise money. We've raised money for affordable housing. We're starting to get more money. So they're saying, well, maybe we could commit this with just the city budget. Maybe we don't need to raise taxes to do this. The City Parks Conservancy and the mayor disagree. They say that the backlog is too large, that even if we were to take money out of the city budget, we're talking about a stream of funding, and so we don't know how the city is going to be in financial state. But we did just get out of financial, literally like a state-ordered financial distress like a year or two ago. So that's kind of where we're at. I think it's a pretty interesting issue. I mean, what else?
And it's only for property owners, right? So a lot of people voting on it doesn't even affect them.
Yeah, if you're a renter, it won't directly affect you. Obviously, your landlord might be like, oh, I have to pay more property taxes, so now I'm going to increase your rent to do it. That's always a possibility. But Parks Conservancy says that 3/4 of homeowners in the city, so if you own a residential property in the city, are going to pay an average of 66 extra bucks a year. And if I'm being frank, that's not that much money.
If you have a house that's worth $100,000, like $50 is not a lot.
Yes, yeah, $60 is not that much. It's so, but that's also just homeowners. So there's probably going to be more people who own commercial property that's assessed at a lot more that are going to have to pay more. But honestly, I think that's how taxes should work: is that people who are richer should pay more.
16 cents a day.
16 cents a day. Our
That's
producer
like,
Josh
when you see
says.
those commercials for like, donate to whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, for just 2 cents a day, you
Like
can
that,
save
yeah.
the shelter.
And so I think one of the interesting thing about the parks proposal is that it's not like a ipso facto, here's this giant capital project, like here's this new Highline Park, and that's what we're funding. And that's usually what gets a lot of easier to get voters motivated. This is kind of like a responsibility thing, at least from the framing of the Parks Conservancy. Like, oh, well, we have this huge backlog, and we want our parks to be in better shape. We want our paths to be in better shape. We want our community centers to have new roofs and things of that nature. And so that's kind of the long term of keeping the upkeep of the parks. But I get that, why people are a little skeptical of this, because, again, considering we do have a surplus, maybe we could just, allocate city money that we already have, not have to raise property taxes. And there's also some concern about transparency over the whole thing. The Park Conservancy is a public-private partnership, so it's not the city budget. It's not the same as the accountability level of the city budget. Parks Conservancy argues that all of the money that's allocated each year will go through a council vote, so there's that level of accountability there, but not in the same way that you could go to every meeting of the city council, which are held every 2 weeks, or every 1 week maybe, and you could say, hey, what are you doing with this money? Why are you doing this with this? I think it's a really interesting thing. I obviously suggest you read our articles. There's also a lot of good coverage. The Post-Gazette's done good coverage. Our former colleague Ashley Murray has done a lot of good stuff on the parks issue.
And for even said, Election Day is next Tuesday.
Yes, November 5th, next Tuesday. If you haven't registered already, I'm sorry. Pennsylvania has really archaic laws, and you can't vote. But sorry about that.
But you can register for next year.
Yes. Yeah. Register
for the primaries.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. What else? Oh, we got some city council races. If we want to talk about those, I guess. There's a really interesting race in the East End, District 9, which is East Liberty, Garfield, Stanton Heights, Homewood, Lincoln Larimer, Point Breeze. There's a 4-way race there between incumbent Ricky Burgess, independent challenger Randall Taylor, and some other quasi-independent, weird parties, because that's how our election system works. Denise Welch and Barbara Daniels. And, I think this is a pretty big race in terms of if you're interested in affordable housing issues. That district has been that's been kind of a ground zero topic in that district. There's a decent amount of affordable housing in places like Larimer. There's a lot in East Liberty. But I think the residents of that district want more. They don't want to be pushed out. They don't want to continue to be pushed out to Penn Hills and these other more affordable neighborhoods. And so that's a big deal, and I was super impressed with the candidates' diverging and nuanced views on housing policies, and I suggest you look into it if that's what you're looking for.
And District 1, currently Darlene Harris's district.
Darlene Harris was taken
lost the primary,
down in the primary to Bobby Wilson, the Democrat. He has a kind of a competitive race too. He has an independent challenger who was a former staffer of Senator Bob Casey. His name's Chris Roselet, and he's raised a decent amount of money, not like a huge amount, but definitely enough to put in a challenge to Wilson, who has a lot of support from the mayor and from some local unions, but Chris Roselet picked up a teachers union endorsement. I think that's a really big deal, and they have some diverging views about development and taxing large nonprofits. So I think that's also a really interesting race, and also Malcolm Jarrett's a socialist who's also running in that race, who is interesting. Yeah. But yeah, what else we got?
Should we talk about the sinkhole?
Yeah, let's talk about sinkhole. Yeah, let's get. Bus sinkhole.
So,
the
in case you yourself have been in a sinkhole and don't know what's happening.
Hannah wrote an explainer about our sinkhole that happened downtown. The bus fell into.
Doesn't mean I understand how sinkholes work.
But she's like our new sort of quasi-expert on sinkholes.
Yeah, there's a sinkhole that opened on 10th Street off of Penn Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
A bus, back end of it, fell into it. A car almost fell into it but stopped just short. And it was a real spectacle.
Yeah, no one was hurt, right?
No one was hurt.
So we can make
one
jokes.
lady had minor injuries, but she's fine. There's only one person on the bus, one passenger.
G31 is not that popular of a bus. No. Goes out to the west end.
And it was 7:30 a.m.
Yeah.
So this bus was sort of stuck, in the ground. It was like at an angle, like if this was the ground and the bus was like that.
Yeah.
So kind of looked like it was shooting into the sky.
Yeah, that's what made it such an iconic image. That's why it went viral. Yeah.
And it was just there, from 7 a.m. till I think they got it out at like 10 p.m. that day.
Yeah.
So everyone who worked downtown was going to look at it. There were literally crowds of people around it, even when they were pulling it out at like 10 p.m.
So
there were still people.
What was speculated caused the sinkhole?
So sinkholes, it's hard to determine what caused a sinkhole, but in a place like Pennsylvania, they're not uncommon just because of the landscape and like the bedrock. There's a thing called karst landscape, which is like
some of that
karst 2.
Yeah.
Like karst 2.
Karst 2, bus falls into a sinkhole.
It's horrible. And it's basically when I think when the bedrock is like very porous, so Pennsylvania
I believe limestone's involved,
Pennsylvania
right?
has some limestone. Western Pennsylvania, I think they're actually more common in eastern Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But then in places like Florida, I was talking to a geologist yesterday,
all
and he
limestone.
was basically like, yeah, Florida's all limestone, so they have a lot of sinkholes. And then in places like Texas, like West Texas, where there's a lot of oil drilling, they've had an increase in sinkholes because, like the fracking sort of, it causes them.
And we have fracking.
Yes. And I asked the geologist I was talking to if that was the case. He said, like, for this sinkhole, no, because it's downtown. There's no fracking nearby, but maybe
there's not a lot of fracking in Allegheny County, and all of it happens on the edges of the county.
Right. So
nothing.
But he said there are big sinkholes in like Washington County out there.
Yeah, which is where most of the fracking happens in our region.
Right. So fracking can cause sinkholes.
Wow.
Because it's sort of like pockmarks the ground,
because
and
you're
then it's
shooting water into the ground,
right.
basically.
Because
you put in the limestone.
Sinkholes happen when there's like a gap between the base of the ground and the top of the ground, and it sort of collapses slowly.
And I should also say that water naturally deteriorates limestone. That's how a lot of caves are formed, basically.
So that's why fracking is a problem, because fracking is like shooting intense amounts of water into the ground. So the one downtown was like maybe caused by sort of just like poor infrastructure. Like when they were building the road, they didn't fill it
I believe you also mentioned
and that it kind of deteriorates over time, and that also the fact that last year was the wettest year on record. This year is close. And that can definitely be a factor, just because again water deteriorates.
Climate change.
Yes, so it's like, well, the sinkholes are not directly caused by climate change, climate change can increase rain levels.
Which it looks like it has.
Right, and that can increase sinkholes. So it's sort of like,
tangentially
a second
related.
degree effect.
Yeah. But did they say how big the sinkhole was? Did they?
I think they said it was 75 to 100 feet, like in circumference, although
Nice.
it was like a kind of a rectangle.
Yeah. Liars.
And like 20 feet deep. But I think the average sinkhole in Pennsylvania is like 3 to 20 feet wide. Like
Okay.
you'll see sinkholes
so
around the city.
This was a big one.
Very big one. You'll see sinkholes around the city sometimes, just like walking around, but
That's
they're
right.
usually like little guys,
Yeah.
I found a Instagram account. I think it's called PWSA Sinkholes
Oh.
at that on Instagram, and they just sort of take photos of sinkholes around town. I think they were sort of like, just a niche account before this, but I think they gained
They've blown
like
up.
2,000 to 3,000 followers
Oh,
after
man.
the sinkhole.
Oh, so jelly.
You want that many Instagram followers?
Oh, I'm not on Instagram, so Twitter though. Follow me. But basically, sinkholes are pretty common. If there's an
They're
account
not.
dedicated
It's not like
to them.
insane for there to be a sinkhole here. It's not like when there's an earthquake and people were like, "How could this happen
Yes.
here?" It geologically makes sense, although the downtown one is possibly due to poor building of the
Infrastructure,
roads.
not just like a naturally occurring
Right.
like, oh, there's a lot of limestone here. It's at the bottom of some watershed or something like
Yeah.
that, and so it makes sense that there's going to be like a sinkhole there.
Right, but
Got
it's
it.
hard. It's hard to predict sinkholes, and also hard to tell what causes them all the time.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good. What do they always say? It's infrastructure week again because we have this sinkhole, and I think yeah. I mean, it seems like it's more tied to kind of just like not super great upkeep of infrastructure,
Right.
which again, America is just so good at. And yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. What else you got going on this week?
I don't know. Did we get any questions, Josh?
Any questions?
Nothing from the old internet.
Okay. Yeah, we're probably gonna be covering more election stuff as it comes around.
I assume you'll be like live tweeting the election.
Oh yes,
night.
yes, election night. I'll be live tweeting. We're gonna do a little bit of coverage of probably district attorney's race. I should also mention that the county executive race is also happening this year. There's actually a lot of races that we didn't touch on. That's another thing I want to say too, is that there's tons of races we didn't touch on. The deterioration of local media is probably one of the saddest things in terms of some of other local races. My girlfriend works in a library, and people would come up to her and be like, "How do I find out about like Swickley, school board?" And she would like chat me. It's like, "Ryan, how do I find out about this?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Local elections are. People don't think they're as interesting as national elections, obviously,
Yes.
so it's hard to.
Even though they directly impact you way
Right.
more than
Right, they're arguably, or are just more important
Yes.
than the national elections.
Yeah, and it's there's just not a lot written about them. And again, Pennsylvania and especially Allegheny County has so many municipalities and so many offices that there's just going to be races that you don't even know who the person is. And when you vote or don't vote for them, and so it's a kind of a sad thing. And I wish our staff wasn't 5 to 7 people or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I always do my research before elections, but I feel like there's still always, every time I go, there's something on the some sort of
Yes.
can't have to vote for them. I'm like, God, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, like the judges is a really good one,
Judges
and
are hard.
I would suggest
which is like judges are so important.
yeah,
but I
they are.
never, they're hard.
It's also hard to vote. It's also hard to really determine a difference in voting for judges because judges can't really actively campaign on what they're going to decide because they have to be.
They can't have a platform.
Exactly,
It's like
they have to be unbiased, and so
Right.
it's weird. It's weird that we elect them.
it is weird.
Yeah, and but I would suggest the League of Women Voters. They do amazing work, and they usually will have information on their website. But at the same time, they're also just like a league of like volunteers and stuff, and so they have questionnaires. They're kind of hard to find. This is one of the biggest problems: is finding the information requires you to be an expert Googler,
Which
basically.
is like elections should be easy. People should it should be easy to vote.
It should be easy to vote.
We
It
should
should
have
be easy to get
a
the
federal holiday
information.
on
We
election
shouldn't. Yes, of course. I'm perturbed that we basically spent all of this effort and money on the presidential election, which is still over a year out, and CNN and all these really, really rich companies spend all their time doing this. And if they could channel some of those resources so that people in Swickley Borough or wherever can figure out a little bit more about their local candidates, whether it's a borough councilor, whether it's their mayor.
And turnout is like pretty low.
Usually low in these
Very
off-year elections, usually around 20%.
But that means if you do vote, like your vote is pretty important because not a lot of people are going to vote.
And that's something that's happened in Allegheny County, is that the turnout is low. That usually can help progressive candidates, to be perfectly honest. We've had some upset wins with low turnout elections. Bethany Hallam, it was kind of the latest example. Liv Bennett, in the north side. Sarah Namarado, Summer Lee, Anita Prizio, Mick Pappas. There's been this kind of insurgency, and so low turnout is bad, obviously, because we want more people to participate in democracy, but it also tends to help people on the fringes because they can amass a movement against people who aren't paying attention.
If
League of
people
Women
want,
Voters.
Information about candidates that we haven't covered, I think Ballotpedia is a good resource.
Yes.
It's sort of just like a wiki site that will just, for elections all over the country, they just sort of like list the candidates.
It gives you some base information. It gives you things. Again, just like
kind of a non-biased, just like here it is.
I would also suggest not to make my girlfriend's job harder, but go to your library, talk to your local librarian. They are experts at finding information. And
that's true.
Whereas you might just type in Swickley Borough Council or something, you're not going to get anything. They're going to know exactly how to get that information, and they can show you how to do it better. And it's honestly, it's a big problem in our country that we don't know how to do that. But it should be easier for people. And yeah. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our episode today. Again, election is November 5th. Go vote.
You can. I don't actually know how to find your polling place.
You can find your polling place on the Allegheny County website. I would Google Allegheny County election polling place and go to the website, and that can help you out. I believe also there's like vote.org, I think, kind of helps you out with that information. Ask around. That's always a good way, too, to figure out exactly where your polling place is. Sometimes it could be confusing. We have a lot of polling places in Allegheny County.
And not all of them are clear. Last year I went to vote. It was raining. I was voting at West Allegheny Hospital. There was like one wet sign in the rain that was barely visible. So
this is the problem.
Be on the lookout.
Yes, we have so many of them that they're not super well advertised. But that also means that most of them, especially if you live in the city, you can walk to them, which is a huge benefit. And pick up our election guide. Look at it. Isn't it? It's spooky.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh yes. Also like to say our drawing was from Vince Dorse, who does a lot of our great covers. He did my busway cover, which I love so much. And he's just look at this face.
These little portraits inside of all the candidates were drawn by Abby Adams, our layout designer.
Yes, which I think also just makes it just so accessible. So sound like an infomercial at this point. I really love our election guide now, and I think you should just read it. I think it's got a lot of good stuff.
Go vote.
Yeah. Bye.